Hello, everybody. Welcome into the NBA Front Office Show. It's getting close to the end of the year. I can't believe it. 2024 almost here already, but we've got a ton of NBA news to break down before we jump into the new year. But Keith, how are you doing, man? And I'm the type of person that continues to write 2023 for like 6 months anyway. I don't know about you. It takes me forever to transition. By the time I actually get used to writing 2024, it's going to be 2025.
Yeah, I am pretty close to that too. I'm glad I don't have to write things a lot anymore. But I was actually weird to even to be here in 2023, but I had a bunch of checks that wouldn't scan. For some reason, the mobile deposit option wasn't working. So I had to go to the actual bank and I had to pause, remembering how do I fill out a
How do I do
deposit
this?
slip? And
Yep.
yeah, because I haven't done that in a while. So it was a different sort of experience, but it's a good to remember. It's all still there. All that muscle memory still works.
I get to the point where picking up a pencil feels weird, or a pen to write something feels strange. But
I
because
still
we
make
type
a
everything.
lot of handwritten notes while I'm watching games and stuff.
Mhm.
Especially if I'm somewhere that I don't have my computer, I always have a little notebook with me, so that part doesn't feel super weird to me. But yeah, I do know what you mean. I had to write a check the other day, and I had to legit think all right, what do I do writing a check?
How do I do
Which
this?
was a weird thing too. But yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, writing checks. It's something that we don't have to do very often these days, and when you do have to, it's almost like you get annoyed, but like, what? I really have to write a check for this? But
Yes, I
anyway,
was extremely annoyed.
yes, right. I left a bill for like a week sitting there, and I didn't pay it because it's just sitting there on the table, sitting there, sitting there, sitting there. I kept looking at it. I'm like, well, I'd have to write a whole check for it, and put a stamp on the envelope and all that kind of stuff. The things that will now deter us, which used to be just the way of life.
Yep.
Um, anyway, we've got plenty of NBA basketball to talk about today, so let's get into it. Um, let's go here. Mikal Bridges, not happy with his minutes. You and I were talking before we came on the air here, Keith, that there was some weird stuff being pulled by Jacques Vaughn to limit minutes without actually sitting a player. What's going on, and why? Why would this have happened?
Yeah, and to be very clear, this isn't Mikal Bridges unhappy generally. This was just last
Yes.
night. They played the Milwaukee Bucks on Wednesday night, and they were in the second game of a back to back. They'd beaten the Pistons the night before, so that had given the Pistons a single season loss, consecutive loss record. Then they moved into this, and now we're in a spot where Jacques Vaughn decided this was going to be a semi-rest day. Now we know Mikal Bridges is one of the NBA's Iron Men. He doesn't really like to miss games. He
Right.
plays a lot. I think was it last year when he got traded, he played, I believe it was 83 games in the season because the Nets had played one less by the time he got there. But what he did was he entirely sat Nick Claxton, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Spencer Dinwiddie were all out entirely. Then he played Mikal Bridges, Royce O'Neal, Cam Thomas, rotation regulars, the other three kind of regular rotation guys. They only played between 10 and 12 minutes each. So Bridges only got 12 minutes. He was asked after the game about how he felt, and he was like, yeah, I didn't like it. He's like, it's, it is basically, he said it is what it is, but I'm not a fan of that decision. And the Bucks ended up winning going away, closer than it probably should have been for a while. But then eventually they pulled away and blew out the Nets and just moved on. So, yeah, interesting decision there. And, I'm guessing, I wonder if Mikal Bridges would have rather just had a full day off or, just would have rather, my guess is probably would have rather just played.
What's the point of only play? I mean, I guess he sat so many other players that if you sit him out the entire game, you don't have enough players for a rotation. But
Yeah.
but that got me thinking though, does this have anything to do with the NBA's resting policy and that sort of thing? It probably doesn't. But
Yeah, he's not an all-star, so
right.
yeah.
So, but anyway,
Yeah.
it's a bit weird to see a player like him of his stature just play 12 minutes in a game. But
Mm-hmm.
again, I don't think this is going to be a consistent thing, but a bit of an oddity nonetheless. And again, I mean, the headline: basketball player wants to play basketball. Like that's why a lot of these people always get on players. Like like, oh, this guy's soft. Why is he taking a night off? All that kind of stuff. Very rarely is it the player. It's
Yep.
usually the teams that are making these decisions.
100%. Yeah. It's, I only know of like one or two situations, and it's guys who are out of the league, so it's not even worth getting into, where teams are like, they didn't really so much care about playing.
Yeah.
These guys now they want to play. Like everybody holds up, Kawhi Leonard as the load management poster child, and that's fair to an extent, but that was never his decision. And up until this recent hip injury, he's played every game this season. So I think when people realize, guys would rather be out there than not, like you realize these are team decisions that are made generally, front office and the sports science staff with, hey, it's time for a guy to rest and sit out and go from there. And then they do. But, Mikal Bridges, my guess is they involve him a little more next time the decision is made, or maybe it's all right, fine, then we're going to take it completely out of your hands and you're just not going to be active for the game.
Yeah. Yep. They need to go one way or another with that. All right, let's jump over to the Houston Rockets, who have been surprisingly fairly solid this season, but they're not going to bench Jalen Green, who's had his ups and downs, I guess is the kind way to say it this season. But they're not going to send Jalen Green to the bench. And again, I think this makes sense. Like the Rockets have been better than expected, but he's a huge part of their future. And so you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you decide, okay, well, he's not getting it done right now. Let's cut into his minutes. Let's move him to the bench. Let's do these things. No, I mean, if you're going to get anywhere, you're going to need Jalen Green to grow as a player, and he's only going to do that if he's on the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be fair, he's been bad this year. There's really no other way to put it. He's been extremely inefficient, which that was the spot where we all thought maybe that takes a bump up this year is his efficiency. He's not creating so much on his own. Fred VanVleet can set him up and other things like that, but it's been very messy. And then all of his counting stats are down, but again, the team's better, so he's not just kind of out there, running roughshod and doing whatever he wants to do and kind of getting
Empty
all his
stats.
plays. Yeah, these are now this team is much better. They've lost their last couple in a row here. They're now, what are they, 15 and 14, 8th in the West after a couple losses in a row. But you're absolutely right. Like I think Ime Udoka is 100% with, if we want to be the team we want to be, Jalen Green has to be a big part of it. So we're not going away from him. And I also think too, putting him on the bench and almost putting him back in the role where it's like, all right, hey, go ahead and get your shots, do your thing. That's probably not going to help things either for him to get back to a better place. It's more just find your things. I thought he made a good comment too, Udoka did, where he said, I'm going to paraphrase it, but basically he's such a good scorer that we know when it comes, like then it'll be floodgates will open and it'll just go. And I think there's probably some truth to that.
And maybe I threw out there up and down on the season. That's my own bias coming in because he blew up way back in November against the Lakers. He dropped 28 points in 21 minutes, shot 73% from the field and 83% from three in that game. So that game definitely sticks out in my memory, and that's a highlight. But he's had some other good ones too. He had a 34-point game against Memphis, but again, big picture.
Those games are very few and far between this year, which that's the tough part, right? He's had a lot of games where it's been 10 points on like 2 of 12 shooting type of nights and that stuff.
Yeah. And those are the
games. Dylan Brooks is hurt too, so they do need him now to give them some more production. I know everybody feels certain ways about Dylan Brooks, but he's been very good for the Rockets, and they need somebody to produce because it falls a lot to without him. It's Fred VanVleet and Alperen Sengun because most of their other guys right now they're kind of dependent players. You need someone to set them up and get them shots, or they get them off rebounds or scramble plays or whatever it is. Whereas you've got Green can at least create a shot, which is something Brooks can do too. Yeah. Fair to say sometimes does it a little too much. And gets a little crazy with it.
But he's shot like insane. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop with Dylan Brooks and for him to go on like a 20% shooting month or something like that. Because so far he's just shot overall on the course of the season very, very well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I get it. It's also let's remember, we are getting in around the 30 game marker here. We're starting to approach the halfway point. Maybe if this continues once we're, closer to the All-Star break, maybe then Udoka moves and says, "All right, we got to do something a little bit different here." But for now, they're winning enough games and they're playing well enough that you don't need to make a change today.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's jump over to the Phoenix Suns. Good news today. According to Shams Charania, Bradley Beal is ahead of schedule and could even make his return to the Suns this weekend. The Suns certainly could use him. They haven't been what they hope to be, certainly. Kevin Durant hasn't been super happy. Eric Gordon hasn't been super happy. And we haven't gotten to see what we got, a game and change of Devin Booker,
Yeah,
Bradley Beal, and Kevin
in
Durant
like 4.5 minutes.
Right, like that's it. That's all they've played together. So this is great news for the Phoenix Suns. I still wonder though, Keith, like they really have this lineup. We have this team where they don't have a point guard. You're either asking Bradley Beal or Devin Booker to be your point guard, and that's not really what they are. Like, is this gonna work? Because if that is going to be the hurdle that they can't clear, because you can feel it when you're watching the Suns on the offensive end that they don't have that piece out there. They don't really have a way to solve that problem this season.
Yeah, and to be clear, Devin Booker is doing a really good job playmaking, but
Sure.
Devin Booker seems to me almost more of a really good playmaking wing. Like that's more what he is versus the kind of more traditional point guard type. And the challenge for Phoenix is they're 15-15. So we're already 30 games into this season, and you still haven't answered questions about what it looks like with all three of those guys on the floor. And that's a problem, right? So you've got to start to figure that stuff out. The only way you're going to figure it out is with everybody on the floor. Now, Kevin Durant, whether he did it because he took offense to everything about being unhappy and all that, he came out and dropped a triple double with 16 assists last night in a win over the Rockets. And then it was, Eric Gordon doesn't feel like he's getting enough shots. So that's another thing when you get Beal back in there. So that just kind of tends to be a little volatile. Are we going to get to a weird spot where these guys are just not, happy and they're not feeling good about where things are at? Where are we going to go? So I think we're in a place where, for right now, it's still unanswered questions with all that stuff, even if pieces and parts have looked really good at times.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, getting Bradley Beal back ahead of schedule, that's going to help them. The more time they can get on the floor, the better. Because I'll tell you what, Keith, this could be a return of the big three for the Suns. This could be another opportunity. This could be a second game, I suppose, for the big three to play together. But that doesn't mean they're going to be together for the rest of the season. I think they are going. Other stuff's going to pop up. Kevin Durant's going to suffer an injury. Devin Booker, Bradley Beal may go back out. So the amount of time they're actually going to have on the floor together before they get to, say, a postseason situation, it's dwindling. So good for them that they're going to get back out on the floor now, because again, that's not going to be like they're just all three healthy for the remainder of the season. So we'll see what they can ultimately turn this into, what Frank Vogel and co can do here with this team, and if they can become the juggernaut that we thought they might be heading into the season. So far, that's looking like a no. But again, we haven't really seen their three together much at all. So hard to make that judgment just yet.
And you got to be careful at the West, really that portion of the West in and around the play-in tournament, because you've got the Lakers are there, the Rockets are still there. We'll see if they stay. Pelicans, but then just behind them, you've got the Warriors, the Jazz. We'll see if this has any staying power. They've won 3 in a row. They're starting to play better, but coming up hard behind all these teams is Memphis. Yep. Memphis is now only 4.5 back. They've won 4 in a row. They're really playing pretty good basketball. So it's going to be a dogfight. You cannot afford to be dropping games in the Western Conference at the bottom, because you're going to get caught from behind by good teams. When you've got Warriors and at least the Grizzlies, Jazz, I'm not fully bought in that that's really real right now, but the Warriors and Grizzlies, that's enough where that's going to be motivating you. Got to get these guys on the floor, got to start winning games, got to start stacking wins, and these are ones where the Suns have thrown away a lot of games that they should have won already this season. And that's caught up to them a little bit. Now we'll see. Can you start playing better and stop doing that the rest of the way. If you can, they're probably fine. But as it stands right now, you got some work to do.
Keith, I can remember back in the day, like the mid 2000s, complaining about how in the West you had teams that were the ninth and 10th place in the West who were above 500 and then missing out on the playoffs. And then looking over at the East, you had below 500 teams making the playoffs. I think this year in the West, we're going to see above 500 teams, or at least at 500 teams, missing the play-in in the Western Conference. So that's going to be, like you said, it just underscores how difficult of a conference it's going to be and how little room for error there is. Because, like you said, you've got the Grizzlies are coming back strong, having won 4 in a row. You've got Golden State. These are teams. I'm with you. I don't necessarily worry too much about Utah. Portland, we know they're not to be worried about. Same thing with San Antonio. But you've got 12 teams that all consider themselves to be playoff teams now that the Houston Rockets are in the thick of things as well. 2 of them are going to be in the outside looking in. And I think 12 teams that could reasonably make cases that, hey, we are playoff quality, and maybe not the top tier teams or whatever, but playoff quality, or at the very least play-in quality. And 2 of them aren't going to make it.
Yeah, absolutely. In the West play-in tournament, again, should be really, really fun, right? We should be at a point where these should be really good games, and you don't want to be there. I'm getting the sense, just talking to people around the league, there's already a few too many teams from my comfort level that are like, well, look what the Lakers and the Heat did last year. Yeah, that's not, teams are not going to do that regularly.
That's not the
like
norm.
you're not going to get through the play-in tournament and then win multiple rounds in the playoffs. Like, it's just not going to be a regular thing. And then beyond that, you don't want to have to be the path that you're taking, right? Like, you'd rather have, but I don't know the single team that will say, rather than be 4th and host the playoff series, we'd rather be 8th and have to win a play-in tournament and get in that way. Like, nobody feels that way. That's just not how it works.
No. Yeah, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Especially when, you run out of gas come playoff time too, if you have to do that. So I do wonder how that'll impact the trade deadline, that whole dynamic. Like, I think we're going to see, once again, probably more buyers than sellers. And that's been a byproduct of the play-in tournament. But I think we're going to see teams that are going to try to pick up pieces to make that run, like the Lakers did last year, like the Heat did that last year. And so it could result in a pretty active trade deadline, unless teams go Toronto Raptors style and just say, nah, never mind. We're not going to do anything.
Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby.
No. I know I shouldn't put that out there in the world, but who knows? Maybe even the Raptors will lose their grinchiness and we'll make some. It
does sound like maybe it's closer than it has been. You can't, if you're Toronto, you can't watch Siakam and Anunoby walk away. Never mind, like Gary Trent and a couple other guys, without making moves if there's moves to be made. It's not to say you have to make a bad trade or take whatever, but you got to do something. You can't just watch these guys be like, all right, see you later. We're leaving too. And there's gonna be teams with cap space that I think would be. Anunoby's a no-brainer. Like, teams will be all over him if he's a free agent. But Siakam, teams would love to have. Gary Trent's a pretty plug-and-play guy just about anywhere. So that's an easy signing, I think, for most teams. So that's just something to be very, very cautious of if we're Toronto. But I feel like that's now we could run back last year and the year before's segments on the Raptors and just change the names, because
that's right. It is indeed. All right, let's jump over Nikola Topic returning.
Hey, you said it right. I'm so proud.
I did say it right. I'm trying to remember that it's the itch. Got to add in that itch. But so he's returning to Red Star. So this is one of the top prospects coming up. You've seen a lot more of him than I have. What is his game compared to?
Yeah, he's big. He's a big guard. I'm not saying at all that I think he's going to be Luka Doncic. That's kind of sort of how he plays a little bit. Like, he's just very in control, does a lot of things. Again, great size for the position he plays, which is like kind of an on-ball wing type player. This year, he he's young too. He's only a teenager still. So this year playing, he's been basically on loan to a team that's called Mega MIS. He was averaging 18.6 points, 6.9 assists this season, and shooting the ball really well. And it was the shot that was kind of the question with him, the size, the ball handling, the playmaking. That's always been there. So what's happened now is Red Star, who's his primary club, has basically said, we're bringing him back. Like the loan is over. We're bringing him back. And for him, he openly is saying, this came out, Jonathan Gavoni had this of ESPN, did an interview with him. And he basically says, hey, it's a huge risk for me, but I'm ready. I'm confident in myself and I need to do this. It could impact my draft chances, but I'm ready to compete and fight, which is great to hear, right? So he's ready to go. This is also like his childhood club that he always wanted to play for with Red Star. They're one of the better teams in Europe. So this is big, and it's a chance for NBA teams are going to be excited because they're going to get to measure him in a whole different way now too, because you're going to see him playing against much better competition. But this is a kid right now, barring something unexpected, should be a top 10 pick in this year's draft.
Yeah, so certainly somebody to keep an eye on. It is kind of refreshing to see somebody taking that room. We hear so much about players who, if you're a top 10 player, you don't work out against anybody else that's in the top 10, or at least, if you're the 10th pick, you'll work out against the 1 pick. But if you're the 3 pick, you're not going to work out against the 5 pick. Things like that. It's nice to see somebody just saying, hey, I'm going to go for it, especially because I grew up as a fan of this team. And again, somebody to keep an eye on heading into this 2024 draft. The whole loan situation, that is pretty foreign to American fans, how a loan works and all of that, and why that's a thing. Because we just think in terms of a trade, a player's either cut, but especially we see this model a lot in soccer. It's buying and selling, but you're not doing so much like trading player X for player Y. You're more buying and selling contracts from clubs and things of that nature.
Yeah, every once in a while in a transfer is what they effectively call a trade or buying a player. Every once in a while, a player will go back the other way, but you're right; it's almost always cash. It's money that goes back, and we're talking millions to hundreds of millions of dollars now, depending on who the player is. So those are those transfers, and then what the teams do is the good ones, at least, they take the money and then they reinvest that in going and getting the next guy who can fit for them. But yeah, like you said, every once in a while a player comes back, but the loan concept is something completely different. And what that is, here's how I kind of think of it. Let's say you are who's a really good team right now. So Denver, right? Denver's a really good team, and they've got Jalen Pickett as one of their players on their bench, doesn't get a chance to play very much. Let's say they were looking at it and saying, wow, Portland really needs a guard. We'd love him to get some experience. They could loan him to the Trailblazers and say, you got him for the rest of the season. He'll play for you. You'll have a chance to be more competitive, play whatever it is, and then we'll get him back at the end of the year. Oftentimes in both soccer and basketball overseas, loans turn into there's a whole thing called loan to buy, which is you loan the player and then they'll end up buying the player from the other team. They'll keep them that way. But it's just a concept because it's all one league in the NBA. It hasn't really hit here with that. If there were multiple leagues that the NBA worked with, or if the NBA worked in conjunction with overseas leagues more, they could do that. But the NBA doesn't allow for loaning players out to, hey, we're going to loan a guy out. Now, draft and stash, that's something different. Those guys aren't under contract with the NBA teams, but we would never see it be like, all right, we're not getting enough run for this player with the NBA team. We're going to loan him to a team in Spain for the year. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, they don't do it. It's an interesting system, though, the way it works, where the idea is to get the player minutes, and then eventually you can bring the player back, or you can wind up selling the player to that club and getting and then again, like you said, reinvest it. It's just a very different system than what we're used to here. So when people hear, oh, he was on loan with another team, I just want to clarify exactly how that all works and kind of what the situation looks like.
It's fun too because you'll see sometimes where promotion and relegation is such a big thing in
Yeah.
basketball and soccer overseas, they'll loan a player to a lower league team to help them try to get promoted or avoid being relegated. And then it'll be the player help them achieve promotion, and then that can launch into where, well, actually he's really good and we want him back. We're seeing a little bit more of that, it feels like, in recent years of actually we want the guy back. He's good.
Yeah.
So we don't want to sell him to you. But yeah, the whole loan transfer process it's a fun thing to monitor. And if anybody's a fan of all of that, that's all going to open up here in a few days because January is their window. They only have small windows that are about a month long in the major leagues over there, especially in soccer side, where it's the transfer window opens and you can actually make these moves. And it's huge. It's like NBA trade deadline on steroids because there's no real no way you could do much else other than do this now, and it turns into players being sold and bought, moved all around, all over the map, and craziness happens. So that'll be a thing for any of the crossover fans or anybody who's just looking to learn a little bit more about that world.
Be interesting if they could implement something like that in the NBA. I've been thinking more big picture stuff like that. Like, what if the NBA went to like 3 nights a week? These are the days that NBA games are on, kind of an NFL style or something like that. Or what if they had sort of a loan system or relegation? I know relegation's never going to fly, but just kind of pondering those big picture type things.
Yeah.
And interesting when you look at how different systems work around the world to different sports.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump back to the NBA though. The Wolves, the majority stake is indeed going to be bought by Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez. We knew this was coming, but the deadline was approaching for I want to say it's the 31st. So it's the end of the year here for them to officially make this happen, but it's going to happen. The Wolves are going to be sold and they're having a great season. So I'm sure that doesn't make them any less enthused with their purchase here, given that the Wolves look like they're very much a team on the rise.
Yeah, so what happened was they had already bought 40% of the team from Glenn Taylor, who's owned the Timberwolves for a long time. He still owned 40%, so now he is going to transition an additional 40% over. He may actually own more than 40, I don't know. But essentially, Mark Lowry and Alex Rodriguez will now own 80% of the team once this goes through and it gets approved and all that stuff. With that, so that has been a thing. They've been basically working on the financing to try to put this together to finish this portion of it, and then there's no indications that it will go further than this. It sounds like this will be the last part of this, but that'll get done, and we're going to see a change in the hands of ownership again. The Mavs sale got pushed through. We saw the Suns sale recently in recent years, so now this will be another one. So more changes in ownership coming, even if this one's been kind of in process for about a year or so.
These teams, they cost so much that it's not like, hey, I'm going to go buy a pizza and I'm just going to use my credit card, right? I mean, you're not going to do that. It's not even quite like buying a house or anything, because if you are in this situation where you've got the kind of money necessary in order to buy a team, that money is not just sitting in a checking account, right? You've got it invested in all kinds of different things. You have to liquidate certain things in order to make it happen, depending, of course, on who you are, how much money you've got. You've got a certain number of partners and things like. So it's not an easy process. It's not like, hey, everybody just throws $5 into the pool and you're going to go order Domino's or something. That's not the way it works. So it's a long process in order to put together all of the funding in order to make a purchase like this. So that's part of why this stuff doesn't just happen overnight, why it takes approval and you got to go through all the finances. And the NBA wants to make sure, hey, if we sell it to somebody, it's not somebody who is suddenly house poor because they bought the team and that's all they've got. And next thing you know, they're making all these cost-cutting moves because all of their money has been burned through, been thrown into purchasing the team itself. So the NBA is going to dig into all this stuff. It's a very, very complicated process in order to get all of this done.
Yeah, the league has been very conscious of that really since the Maloofs owned the Kings. They were known to be one of the less rich ownership groups out there, and that ran into a lot of problems with the Kings, with the arena, and then just with signing players and being willing to go deep into the luxury tax. A lot of stuff back in the right around the turn of the century or so when all that was going on with the Kings, which led to basically pretty persistent rumors that they were going to move and be bought by somebody
Yeah.
else and be in another place and all that. And then obviously Vivek Ranadive led an ownership group to buy the Kings and change it all out. But the NBA has been very conscious of that. Semi-related to all this, did you see the Steve Ballmer thing?
The thing that he's making $1 billion
$1 billion
passively.
for
I did see
doing
that.
nothing. Yeah,
I
must
did
be
see that. All of
nice.
his investments, all of his stocks and everything like that, just
Yeah.
the dividends
So it's the
from all of that.
dividend from the Microsoft. He owns
Yeah.
4% of the company. They have for years now. Microsoft has chose to just pay out the dividends, and they're paying out the dividends as his is expected to be $1 billion. So he's literally going to wake up one day and just have $1 billion more. And what I said when I read that was, and I'm sure he's going to be like, "Oh, that's nice. Can I get some eggs? And what's the latest on Kawhi's hip?" Like I'm sure he's
Right.
not like, yeah. That'll be
That's
us someday.
that's
Someday,
a
me and
point when the front office show really blows up, when people stop making us the best kept secret. But that's the point where money like no longer matter. It's not
you.
even a thought. It's not considered, like
Yeah.
price tags on things don't matter anymore. You
Yep.
know what I mean? Like that's
All
that's
monopoly
crazy.
money. Yeah.
It is exactly. That's where I was looking
Yeah.
at. So I was looking at this yesterday. Like the Powerball is up again and everything. And of
Yeah.
course we all do that. Well, what would I do if I won and everything? And I'm like,
Yep.
I was just looking at interest rates and all that, and I'm like, Jesus, if I won the Powerball, I could just put it all in just a standard savings account, getting it with what interest is right now. And I think even after tax, it was something like you'd be making like 16 million a year in interest. Like
Yeah.
I'm like you, like that's just absurd. It's crazy. You could just live off of that and wouldn't even have to touch the principal or anything. I mean, and live beyond comfortably. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's a very different world than the world that you and I live in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. My answer to that, it was way back when I was probably like 20 or 21 at the time because I was still living in Massachusetts. And I remember I was talking with my parents because it was like 200 million or something.
Mhm.
That was like the highest it had ever been then. It hadn't approached like $1 billion. And in Massachusetts, they didn't have Powerball. So we did cross over into Rhode Island to buy Powerball tickets. And my mom was like, "I'm gonna go. Do you want me to get you a couple?" And I'm like, "Yeah, get me a couple too." And it was like, "What are you gonna buy if you win?" And it was my standard answer was, "I'm gonna buy the Kansas City Royals because they were for sale for like $80 million at the time."
Oh,
I
there
was
you
like, "I'm
go.
gonna buy the Royals." Like that was like literally like what I would tell anybody who asked. I was like, "I'm buying the Royals," back then.
And I wonder what they're worth now. I'm
Oh
obviously
yeah,
much, much more. I mean,
it's not $80 million. I know
it,
that.
it would probably be a good investment. Anyway, some unscheduled nonsense there just to close things out. Why not dream about the lottery and all that sort of stuff?
Do you ever go on Zillow and like look at like really expensive houses? Have you ever done that?
I have. It can be
Yeah.
depressing, but yes, I
Oh,
have.
it does get a little depressing where it's like, man, I could live in maybe that corner of the garage. Just related. So this is weird, and I don't want anybody thinking I'm living on the high horse here. I'm clearly not. But not far away from us, like maybe 10 minutes away, Johnny Damon, the former baseball player,
Huh?
he's selling his house, and it's on Zillow for like $30 million.
Oof.
And now it's like 10 minutes away, but might as well be like a world away from where it is. Like it's just crazy. Like it's right like Isleworth adjacent. If people know Isleworth, that's like where like Shaq had a house and Grant Hill and Penny
Yeah.
Hardaway and Tiger Woods and all those guys. And those are like insane mega mansions in there. But $30 million. So I was like, what's a $30 million house that a former baseball player owned look like? And pretty much exactly what you would think. Like I, zipped around a little bit. And there were things where my wife was like, that's so tacky. Like she was just, and I'm like, it's if you have that kind of money, you could change it every week
Yeah.
if
You can do
you
whatever
kind
you
of didn't
want.
come out the way I wanted. Yeah. So just some little added on unscheduled nonsense at the end.
Oh, that rich guy's life. Someday, Keith.
Someday,
Someday.
someday. On that note, we need you guys to get the likes and subscriptions up
Yes.
so we can get there. My goal, honestly, by the end of 2024, we should have caught Mr. Beast. That's the goal. He's only
No
at like
problem.
200 million subscribers. So,
Oh, easy.
yeah, just get on it, guys. Come on, get us there.
Easy. No
Yeah.
problem. If we can just get like, I don't know, 20% of the world's population to
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
subscribe to this channel,
Yeah.
everything will be fine. No problem.
Yeah. Or create like 7 usernames each and subscribe that way. I don't care how you do it. Just do it.
Just make it happen.
Vote early, vote often.
There we go. There we go.
And the
All right,
dogs are
everybody.
telling me the groceries are home and it's time to wrap this up.
The dogs say no more unscheduled nonsense. All right. Well, on that, we'll call it a day. Appreciate everybody for joining us. Again, make sure you do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts as well. Until next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.